Hi. In March 1999, Futurama first aired. During its run, it won 6 Emmys and 9 Annie Awards, making it kind of iconic. Futurama over the year has been canceled 2 separate times and now lives on Hulu. This last week, I took the time to watch all of the best episodes of every season of Futurama. So how I decided what were the best episodes of every single season was I pulled all the data from IMDb and just pulled the highest rated episode for each of the seasons. So let's check out the rise and fall of Futurama. In this episode of Alyssa Talking Right At You, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't watched Futurama, don't watch this. Well, watch Futurama, then watch this.
How about a kiss for good luck? I meant tongue luck.
Futurama has been one of my favorite shows. I watched it for the first time when I was first leaving high school, again once I was in college, and recently I've watched it in the making of this video. Episode 1 of Futurama is the most highly rated episode in all of season 1. And this is because of its very iconic fleshing out of the Futurama world. This pilot is surprisingly efficient, introducing the entire main cast and setting a sort of emotional tone to the series, which is really interesting because you see that coming through in lots of future episodes as well, where it's not just silly ha-ha, it also has a lot of really good stories that aren't necessarily joke driven. We start on a delivery boy named Philip J. Fry delivering a pizza to an
Icy wiener. Oh, crud.
After realizing Fry has been duped, he falls into a cryo freezer, keeping him frozen for 1,000 years and bringing him to the future. And you've already missed something. A 1-second moment that has already played in this episode becomes important 4 whole seasons later, which is truly remarkable how they're able to make that happen and already had the foresight that they were going to make this shadow extremely important. The attention to detail is really what makes Futurama truly amazing. After Fry awakens from his 1,000-year sleep, we meet our main characters, Leela, a one-eyed alien, and Bender, a maniac robot who's got a little tood, if I would say so myself. In just 22 minutes, we meet almost all the main characters for the rest of the show. We of course know Fry, Bender, Leela, and of course the professor, Fry's only living relative. And this relative is his great, whatever. It's his nephew, essentially. We also meet Nixon in the Talking Head Museum, which is relevant in so many future episodes. We see New York from the 20th century, which is actually underground New York. And we also get to see Planet Express and live through this world building process that's honestly beautiful. We get so many different parts of the show all encapsulated within this first episode. We meet the cops who are referenced so many times and in so many different episodes. It's just truly amazing how much information they were able to pack into this single episode. In episode 1, the animation style is definitely still finding its groove, and some of the different sections in the episode feel slightly rushed. I mean, they do fit a lot of information in, but Leela quits her job with like 4 seconds of thinking about it.
What are you doing?
Quitting.
Why?
Because I've always wanted to. I just never realized it until I met you.
With her character you see in the future, that wouldn't necessarily be a decision she would make. But immediately in the first episode, you see the duality that Futurama is able to bring. They balance Fry losing everything, never being able to see his family again, and Leela being the only one-eyed alien in the world.
You can't possibly understand what it feels like to be so alone.
I understand. I'm the only one-eyed alien on this whole planet.
And they mix that with a balance of lowbrow humor, with Bender being in a suicide booth in the first few seconds, and also just his general attitude towards people and things. It's just an interesting way to bring an entire show together. It slightly reminds me of the duality of BoJack Horseman, but I will say BoJack Horseman is a better show than Futurama, but I love them both. This balance of the lowbrow humor and the emotional side to the characters is really a defining trait of Futurama, and you'll see that throughout this analysis of all these episodes. There's a lot of emotional work and comedic relief within those episodes. This episode ends with Fry deciding he will, in fact, be a delivery boy, although he tried to deny his career chip in the first place, but he will be doing it at Planet Express for his great nephew.
I'm a delivery boy! Fry!
For season 2, the highest rated episode is Anthology of Interest. There is another episode that's Anthology of Interest later on in the show, but we won't get to see that today. We open with the professor's latest invention, the fingerlonger, which honestly seems kind of useful. It's a dumb piece of tech only used to push a single button. The button powers up the what if machine. And what follows is Futurama's first anthology episode, broken into 3 segments, starting with what if Bender was 500 feet tall. Bender becomes a kaiju-sized metal machine of destruction who extorts cities. We get a bunch of outwardly comedic points within this episode, but also some hidden jokes. Again, the attention to detail is great within this show. One of the ones that you might not have caught while watching is this Mets jab where it says winners, and the last time they actually won was in 1986, which would have been 1,000 years prior. So I just thought it was like a fun little jab for no reason, but I liked it. The second segment of this episode is what if Leela was more impulsive? And your answer is she murders people. My favorite scene within this segment is after Leela essentially has killed everyone for catching that she is the murderer, she decides to sleep with Fry to protect herself from him telling anyone.
To make sure you won't talk, I'm gonna have to do something really impulsive. So, Fry, what do you think of the impulsive new me?
I like it.
And I'm a sucker for a love story. Shoot me, you know? And I love that they bring them together so early on within the show's running. But unfortunately, it does not stay a stable relationship throughout this whole show. And it's just on and off moments where they are together and they aren't together. And sometimes that can get a little jumbled. In this segment, we also meet Scruffy, who's one of my personal favorite characters. He's not super relevant to the plot, but he's a mysterious man. And what girl doesn't love a boy who's a little mysterious, you know? He's also considered a fan favorite just of how jarring his interactions can be. In segment 3, we see arguably the most important not even arguably, it is the most important segment. And it is, what if Fry never got frozen? This is the most important and existential of the 3. Without Fry falling into the cryo tube, there's a paradox that essentially destroys the entire universe. Stephen Hawking shows up, Al Gore is there, and I love that it's actually Stephen Hawking and Al Gore playing their own parts. And Stephen Hawking was a fan of Futurama, and Al Gore's daughter actually worked on the show. And it's just more enjoyable to watch when you know the people being portrayed on the show are actually in on the joke. I love how throughout the episode, Hawking refers to everything as Hawking.
I call it a Hawking chamber. I call it a Hawking hole.
Because, I mean, he's an iconic dude. You gotta. It's clever, weird, and the episode is weirdly important because it shows us the delicate nature of how important Fry actually is to the story and the entire universe of the Futurama core. This episode shows how important Fry is and doubles down on that foreshadowing we saw in the first episode of Fry has to get in the freezer. Each story within this episode is self-contained, but it says something important about each of the characters. It says that Bender loves power and he is kind of an egomaniac. Leela can hide her anger under control and also could be a little scary if she put her mind to it. And Fry, despite being a complete imbecile most of the time, is actually the universe's linchpin. So it all comes together in a really great way. I think this episode shows that Futurama writers are able to put so much information in just a short period of time. I mean, this is still a 20-ish minute episode, and they fit 3 whole entire stories in, beginning, middle, end. And they have the whole overarching backstory of it's actually them watching what if this happened. Throughout this episode, some segments are definitely stronger than other segments. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Bender one, but the concept is still fresh with each of the characters, and it's not them just living within their characterized frameworks of Bender being a robot and Leela being so straightforward all the time. I also think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity here. There should have been some merch for the finger longer. Yeah, that feels right. Okay. Because that would have been fire and I would have bought it. So, come on. Season 3. The Luck of the Fryrish. The Luck of the Fryrish is tied for the second highest rated episode of all Futurama. And you best believe I cried my first time watching it, my second time watching it, and definitely my third time watching it. In this episode, Fry is definitely convinced he's cursed. He's had bad luck his entire time since he's been to the future, and he attributes this to not having his lucky 7-leaf clover that he left 1,000 years in the past. So they decide to take a trip to old New York.
Man, Father Time really took a bat to this place.
See what I mean about this world building stuff? It's really interesting to see on the first episode they brought up old New York, and it became important later on in season 3 when Fry is trying to go back home. Fry goes to his old childhood home only to find that his brother Yancey has stolen his 7-leaf clover that was left so carefully in the jacket of a Breakfast Club album. Yancey, who in Fry's eyes stole his spot in a breakdancing crew, stole his dream of becoming the first person on Mars, and even stole his name, is not a great guy and is just a copycat trying to be Fry.
I should have been the first person on Mars. He stole my clover, he stole my name, and he stole my life.
Throughout the episode, there's a slow build with flashbacks woven in perfectly throughout the episode, being able to see more of the backstory between Fry and his brother Yancey. The sibling rivalry is realistic and relatable, with Fry's bitterness obviously rooted in childhood insecurity. And he carries this bitterness all the way to the grave, where he decides to dig up his brother in the Cemetery of Heroes. As Bender, Leela, and Fry all dig up what Fry believes to be Yancey's grave, Fry comes to the realization that it's not his brother at all. It's actually his nephew, who is named after him. The first person on Mars was Philip J. Fry, Fry's nephew. Here lies Philip J. Fry, named for his uncle to carry his spirit. Then we get the final flashback where Yancey reveals getting his clover and giving it to his son, then naming his son after Philip.
I'm naming you Philip J. Fry in honor of my little brother, who I miss every day. I love you, Philip.
You hear that emotional music swell, and a level of musicality is added to the show. You see that it's much more than just a silly show. It has emotional appeal to it, and they can be great writers in very different ways. This episode doesn't end in a laugh, it ends in tears. This is one of the most heartfelt moments in the entire show. We see Fry break down and we break down because it's such an emotional moment to learn that all this animosity you've had towards your brother actually has been misdirected, and it's just it's a hard watch a little bit, but it's a really beautiful moment for when they show the final flashback. And I honestly don't have any bad things to say about this episode. I truly enjoyed it, and it's one of my favorites. It's definitely in the top 5 for me, and I love it. This episode shows that they don't just do comedy, they do emotions too. It's much more than a silly show. Season 4, Roswell That Ends Well. Now for a drastic turn, and this episode also has a lot of emotions with it. The emotions you're going to feel? Disgust. We start the episode where Fry puts metal in the microwave, which we've all done it. I once put a plate. Okay, it wasn't even my fault though. I put a plate in the microwave and it had like little confetti pieces in the plate. Put it in the microwave to heat up some leftover pasta, my favorite snack. And the plate literally caught on fire. I put it in the microwave and it literally just like burst into flames, which I blame the manufacturer, not myself, because when can I not put a paper plate in the microwave? Whatever though, I digress. We jump right into Fry microwaving popcorn/metal in the microwave during a supernova, which of course turns into a wormhole and sends them back in time to 1947 New Mexico. Yeah, it's fine. It makes sense, I promise. Right away, Bender's body gets completely thrown from the ship and shattered, so they send Zoidberg out to go clean it up by himself, which leads to him getting captured by the military.
Are you right? Here's the plan. Zoidberg, pick up the pieces. Everyone else, take 5.
While Leela, Fry, and the professor all end up figuring out they're in the middle of New Mexico, they also understand they are the cause of one of the most infamous conspiracy theories of all time, the Roswell crash. In this episode, we see several subplots that are all really important to the story and really fun to watch. Zoidberg is being tested on like an alien.
Stomach contents, 1 deviled egg.
Deviled egg?
The same deviled egg.
Bender loses his body, and of course the Roswell crash. as well as some fun little tidbits with that, having a conspiracy theorist be allowed on base just because no one would believe him and it would be funny to have him. It's just like a random thing that they included, but honestly, I loved it. And here's where the episode goes from funny to uncomfortable. Fry's grandfather is also on the Roswell base. So what does Fry do? He tries to keep him safe. What actually happens? Fry kills him. He literally gets blown up in a house. Now, this is where the writers really commit to the bit of not caring what people think. Fry then comes to the conclusion that because his grandfather died and Fry still exists, he couldn't have actually been his grandfather, which means his grandma isn't really his grandma, right? Yeah, you know where this is going. Yeah, I know. The main character has a full-on incestuous relationship with his grandmother in a time-traveling paradox. Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, it kind of works. It's weird. It goes along with the show plot really well and also leads you to understand why maybe Fry has such a low intelligence is because he's just not smart at all. I mean, he double-dipped the DNA.
Who's my grandfather? Isn't it obvious? You are.
This episode actually won the show one of its Emmys, and it's a really well-written episode. There's a lot of great jokes within the episode, like letting a conspiracy theorist on just to essentially take photos of things and find the Loch Ness Monster and the first UFO sighting. It's just fun to watch, and a lot of Easter eggs in there. Futurama definitely pushes boundaries, and in this episode, it's really airtight pacing. It goes fast like most of the Futurama episodes, and you feel like they could slow down in some areas, but it works out really well. This episode ties into Fry's family tree, as well as making fun of a bunch of different sci-fi 1950s tropes, so it's super fun to watch. If there's a downside to this episode, it's definitely that the humor leans more into the gross and uncomfortable than the actual just silly, but a lot of people get behind it, and a lot of people really love this episode. The Fry grandma thing is either something you enjoy and you think is funny, or you kind of lose your appetite over. I'm more in the lose your appetite section, but you know, I still love Futurama and it's still fun. Enos, Fry's grandfather, has an interesting characterization in this episode of essentially being in the closet.
But did you ever get the feeling you're only going with girls because you're supposed to? What?
Justice for Fry's grandpa because he didn't want to be his grandpa in the first place. I guess he never got to be his grandpa. Season 5, Jurassic Bark is the best rated episode of all Futurama episodes. And when I said I cried to Luck of the Fryrish, I cried twice as much to this one because, oh my god, it is horrible. Horrible in like a sad way, not horrible in a bad way, because honestly, this episode's super good. When practicing for Fry and Bender's magic show, they decide to drop by the Museum of Fossilized Things in the 2000s, only to find Fry's dog. Early setup of this episode kind of feels like it's going to be a nostalgia gag back to his original timeline, and it is, but there's so much more levels to that. This episode covers the relationship between Fry and his dog Seymour. Fry first finds Seymour as a puppy starving on the streets, and Fry immediately bonds with him as he feels it gives him a bit of purpose, and Fry decides to bring Seymour everywhere he goes, including inside the pizza joint, which honestly, the idea of that kind of grossed me out. On the day Fry was frozen, Seymour didn't want Fry to leave, but Fry asks Seymour to stay put and just wait for him to get back. When we see this scene again of Fry falling into the freezer, there's actually even more details within the shadows, which is so fun. Like, I love that they keep adding more levels to the deeper side of the show, and that you can watch one episode and get a full story beginning to end, but also there's so much more story if you watch it all the way through. It's just really cool to watch. This scene also really keeps that Futurama lore intact, so we can go back and watch these episodes and see actually what was going on underneath the desk, which is really important to the whole premise of the show. Back in the future, the professor tells Fry he can actually bring his dog back to life and defossilize him, which I don't think that's a real thing, but we'll pretend. Fry is extremely overjoyed. Bender is not. The contrast between Bender's jealousy and Seymour's loyalty is apparent in this episode. After building up to a lot of tension between Bender and the concrete dog, it builds to a boiling point where Bender decides to throw Seymour into the lava, which is actually the most evil thing he ever does. Fry is obviously extremely distraught
He'd come after me!
because Bender just threw his best friend into a vat of lava, but Bender feels remorseful. So he decides that he will go in and save the dog. As the defossilization process is working, Fry realizes that the dog died at age 15, and Fry only knew Seymour until he was 3. So Fry stops the process because why save the dog when he had a full life after Fry? So all good, happy ending, right? Wrong. And here's where we get our final flashback. After Fry was gone, Seymour spent his years sitting outside the pizza shop where Fry once left him, hoping for the boy who once saved him to come back. This episode is so hard to watch again, as it's extremely depressing, and it just makes me think about like the moment my animals have passed and how like hard and terrible that is. The only thing that feels out of character for this episode, and my only critique, is that there's no one that would not bring their dog back. Like, I would still want my little puppy Dakota to come and hang out with me, even if it was just for a little bit. Especially with like that future tech, that dog would live forever. So give him another whole life. Don't just let him die, you know? Sad. And others critique that the episode lacks comedic feel, and I definitely agree with that. There's not as much comedy in this episode, unless you find the whole Bender scene funny, but like, honestly, it like gives me anxiety, the fact that he just throws him in the lava. But I think this episode shows the versatility of the show, again, pulling your heartstrings, but also able to tell a good story. If you need more proof that Futurama can be more about just Fry's idiocy and robots, then this is kind of what you need to see. Jurassic Park is a lesson in storytelling. It's not just a silly little sci-fi show. It's a story about love, loss, and loyalty as well. Anyways, now that we are all depressed because that was horrible, let's get to season 6. Bender's Big Score, part 4. This is the first season Futurama has after leaving Fox and going to Comedy Central. And this season is, in my opinion, the worst of the seasons. And it's because it originally was movies broken up into different parts. And so it just feels very detached from the original show. Bender's Big Score was originally made a full-length movie and then sliced into 4 episodes. Part 4 is the final part in that arc, and that's what is the highest rated episode of season 6. And this episode tries to wrap up a lot. There's time travel, love stories, intergalactic people, doomsday devices, and a musical number. Yeah, musical number. So interesting, not great, but interesting. We start with Earth being scammed by nudist alien con artists. Of course. Bender's been time hopping nonstop, and Robo Santa Claus, who we haven't talked about yet, but is shockingly important and relevant in a lot of episodes, and evil. So keep that in mind. We also get cameos from Hypnotoad, my personal favorite. We also get Nixon's head, Zap Brannigan, all while the crew rallies together to take Earth back. There's even an elf segment that's there. Remember the musical?
Shut up! Now fetch those bunnies by the phone.
Yeah. The central emotional thread throughout this episode is Lars, Leela's fiance, is actually a time paradox duplicate of Fry, but honestly it really feels glossed over, and that it doesn't get the attention to detail or the time that it needs to properly flourish in such a short period of time. There's almost too much going on. In theory, this is a great twist. Fry literally sacrifices a version of himself to have Leela be happy. But the moment gets buried in a mountain of sci-fi noise and exploding timelines. It doesn't land like it should. And also it's frustrating because it doesn't actually help Leela and Fry get together fully. Even though it's teased so much, it's like this should be the turning point in which they get together. But this season almost feels like it's fully separated from the rest of the seasons. It's not cohesive within them. We also do get a quick nod back to Seymour the dog, which should be a tearjerker callback, but again, blink and you'll miss it because it's so quick. I feel like in order to get the full story, you need to watch all 4 parts, but kind of the beauty with Futurama is watching one episode and knowing what is going on from beginning to end and not having to watch 3 other episodes before that to actually understand anything. And I feel like this season really loses it for me because of that. The humor feels scattered, the pacing is kind of frantic, and the emotional moments don't get the time they need to breathe. The sci-fi noise kind of just drowns out the heartfelt moments, which honestly is one of the reasons I love Futurama, is because of that heartfelt moments that actually connect the story all together and give a deeper meaning behind each of the characters. Compared to episodes like Jurassic Park or The Luck of the Fryrish, this episode does not hold up nearly as much. And it's because those episodes build up to a beautiful emotional ending that you can connect to, and it's all within one episode. This one kind of just feels like a checklist. It's still Futurama, so there are fun moments. There's silly bits, and there's a lot going on. I mean, it's nudist alien con artists, which is random and fun like Futurama is, but it's just not as well put together as some of the other episodes. Ambitious, yes. Fun, yes. Memorable, not in a way that the show is capable of. Season 7 of Futurama brings us back to the roots of Futurama, where things are connected and its world building becomes important again. Things aren't just surface level again, haha, silly jokes. There's also an emotional tone to some of the episodes that can be really heartwarming, and you feel more connected to the characters. In the best rated episode of season 7, Fry is supposed to be taking Leela out to dinner for her birthday, but he is chronically late. He promises he'll make it up to her and have the perfect birthday dinner.
Let me make it up to you. I'll treat you to a fancy birthday dinner tonight at Cavern on the Green.
But things do not go according to plan. In this episode of Futurama, we see the writers really flexing their muscles of things they've already done in the past. We see time travel, love stories, emotional weight, and visual gags. And of course, the Fry and Leela love story, where I feel like they actually get their moment to be together. Fry promises to take Leela out for her birthday, and for once he's trying to be thoughtful. But as he's signing her card, the professor pulls Fry, Bender, and himself into his new invention, the forward time machine. It's supposed to be a quick hop, only 10 seconds, but the professor falls over and pushes them way further into time than they originally planned. They end up in the year 10,000 AD. Fry has officially missed his date by a few thousand years, and Leela, back in the past, is essentially devastated. What's great about this episode is how it does so many things right without overdoing it.
They did it! They blew it up! And then the apes blew up their society too! How could this happen? And then the birds took over and ruined their society. And then cows. And then, I don't know, is that a slug maybe?
The concept is high sci-fi, but the plot is very easy to follow. Every jump forward gives us a visually new and distinct world, from apocalyptic wastelands to advanced civilizations, all the way back to literal heat death. The animation also is significantly better than the earlier season, and you really see it jump up here. But the core of this episode isn't necessarily science fiction, it's emotion. Fry and Leela's story is told on two parallel tracks here, which is a really fun way to follow the story. While Fry jumps through time, his card finally makes it back to Leela because he lost it in the original time travel transfer. Leela, in her old age, reads the card from Fry and realizes she's been mad at him her entire life and decides to write him a message for future Fry to see. The message reads, "It was the best time of my life." Honestly, brutal, and the emotional impact of this scene is really beautiful because you know that Leela actually did love Fry. It wasn't just a one-way street where Fry was in love with Leela and it wasn't reciprocated. After Fry, the professor, and Bender decide to keep going through time, they reach the end of the universe as they know it. Then a second Big Bang. The whole going forward until you wrap back around again trick is very Futurama, and honestly I kind of loved it. But it always makes me think, like, do you feel like it's the actual person you're supposed to be with? Because like he's not with the original Leela. She died forever ago. So it's just, it's interesting, definitely. During this first wraparound, and yeah, I said first, the professor makes a stop in order to shoot Hitler in the head, which is honestly just like a fun gag that like didn't need to be in there, but I loved it. And then the professor, of course, falls over and overshoots the timeline once again. Therefore, they have to go through the third Big Bang. This time, the professor says he'll just shoot Hitler out the window.
Darn! I hit Eleanor Roosevelt by mistake.
Which is honestly just another funny little bit because why? Fry then meets Leela at the original dinner he was supposed to meet her at. The whole episode wraps with Bender burying their alternate realities bodies, which of course it does, because time travel, you gotta do what you gotta do, am I right? Same thing in Rick and Morty, they had to kill the other ones. Throughout this episode, it frustrates me a little to see the characterization of characters being the main pushing point of the story moving along. Some of the jokes fall into just characterization comedy. So Bender is an angry person, so he gets angry. Bender is irrational, so he's irrational. And it's kind of repetitive at this point and nothing new and fresh. I do love the idea of all the different scenes that they show when they're time traveling, but I wish we kind of dove into those civilizations a little more. It really is them just standing in the time machine and going through each of these sections, and we're getting a 30-second bit with each of the civilizations. So it's interesting. I also don't like that Fry essentially was going to cheat on Leela.
Please be the guests of honor at our fertility banquet.
Well, there's certainly no harm in a fertility banquet. I could eat and fertilize.
Like, what was that? No thanks. I love how you get so many different world designs within this episode, but I really wish we dove into them a little bit more and got some more details on these civilizations and things like that. In the end, the late Philip J. Fry episode is one of the most highly rated episodes of Futurama, and I love it, flaws and all. Okay, we're on season 8, everybody. Woo! Almost done. Law and Oracle is the best rated episode of season 8 of Futurama. This episode is full of different tropes from different movies, including The Minority Report, Tron, and a bunch of different cop tropes of them not getting training and also beating people with batons. So it's topical. After the crew is held hostage and saved by police, Fry is inspired to shake things up and joins the police force. He graduates from the academy with flying colors and in no time at all, getting paired with his robot cop partner, who we all know as the famous cop that's been in most of the episodes of Futurama. The neon-lit cyberspace and pre-crime sequences are a visual treat in the episode, and it's really fun to see those callbacks and gags for those different movies and TV shows they're poking fun at. Once Fry is a full-fledged police officer, he joins the Future Crimes Division, which is a spoof of the Minority Report, completed with pre-crime predictions and an unhinged oracle named Pickles. The central conflict of the episode arises as Fry realizes that Bender is going to commit a crime, and the only way Fry will be able to stop him is to shoot Bender, but Fry doesn't want to shoot Bender, so if he doesn't, then all of his friends at the Planet Express will die. It's a solid dilemma with a dark absurdity that Futurama works with best. Fry manages to outsmart the Oracle, who was lying to steal the booze for himself, and there's a happy ending where Fry is ultimately fired from the police, thank God, but he is given a promotion at Planet Express.
Executive?
It's a meaningless title, but it helps insecure people feel better about themselves.
I feel better about myself.
This episode does create some plot holes, which is my biggest critique of it. There's different things between the cop being retired, that's normally partnered with the RoboCop, but he is back in later episodes. And then also how Fry deceived the Oracle when it's all-knowing and able to see the future. It's just not super fleshed out and feels slightly rushed over with the explanation. Still, Law and Oracle does what Futurama does best, which is playing with sci-fi tropes and delivering great animation and fun, silly jokes. And making fun of modern jobs in a way that does feel pretty current and real still, even though it came out years ago. This episode might not be the most emotionally powerful, but it's clever, quick, and full of different good moments, while also pulling in a lot of different audiences who are fans of these other types of shows like The Minority Report or Law and Order, so it is fun. Season 9. This episode opens in true Futurama fashion. The professor summons the crew with a back signal only to reveal it's just for a new soda machine. Fry quickly becomes addicted to the latest flavor, Slurm Loco, which honestly, that garbage cannot be that much different from the stuff everyone's putting in their body. Those Prime drinks, crazy, bro. They're so unhealthy. He drinks so much Slurm Loco that he ends up glowing at the end of the episode, which makes sense to me. You can't tell me you're not going to glow if you drink 12 bottles of Prime a day. There's no way. As Fry addictedly drinks Slurm Loco like a wild person, Bender tries to flirt with some new ladybot, but gets publicly antenna shamed by the new soda machine, Bev. The heated argument that ensues between Bender and Bev, the soda machine, quickly turns into a romance session. And soon after, Bev gives birth to a baby bot named Ben. Bender, of course, wants nothing to do with fatherhood.
No.
Until he sees Bev mistreating the baby, which pushes him to be a real dad. This is one of Bender's most emotionally grounded episodes when in pretty much every other episode he is uncontrollable maniac. His slow transformation into a mostly responsible dad is both heartwarming and silly. One of my favorite parts of this episode is actually the sex education video where we learn robots can reproduce without being built.
Meet Gerald, a maturing young robot.
Hey, he looks like me.
His hideous appearance is a byproduct of his hardware gearing up for an important mission: reproduction.
What ensues after this is the relationship grows between Ben and Bender, where Bender teaches Ben all of the things he needs to know, including how to steal, cheat, and most importantly, how to bend. But there's a problem.
He has only one expansion slot, and it holds his memory card. This robot will never bend.
This plot point where Ben only has one slot in his head kind of feels random and is never brought up before this, so it feels a little bit sloppy and just added in there. It's almost as if they didn't want Bender to be a dad forever, and so they were like, we gotta find a way to get rid of this kid so we can have Bender have a kid, but like, it's not actually important to the show. As Bender fights to keep custody and help his son find his identity, Fry continues to glow bright from all the slurm, eventually serving as a literal beacon to guide Bender and Ben through a foggy night. Throughout this episode, a lot of the moments feel that they rely heavily on yelling and screaming rather than actual clever writing, especially in the middle stretch where we see Bev and Bender yelling at each other a lot, which is silly, but it just is like, it doesn't make sense. It's random.
Well, I'm drunk and violent now. He's coming with me.
Still, The Bots and the Bees is an emotional episode for some, as Bender finally becomes a real father and actually has to say goodbye to his son after he loses all of his memories to get his bending card. This episode overall holds little to no significance in the long-term run of Futurama, as Bender's kid is mentioned, I think, one other time in another episode where Bender's like, oh yeah, I do have a kid that goes to bending state, whatever. It delivers a well-rounded emotional growth for Bender, but this emotional growth doesn't extend past to this episode, which I would love to see the evolution of a character, not just the stagnation of the same character. This episode isn't Futurama at its most profound, but it does have a lot of charm and absurdity and robots, and a surprisingly touching father-son storyline. Bev, on the other hand, feels more of a one-note character, making the custody conflict feel rather shallow. This section kind of reminds me of how Archer has a really good plot line going and the character develops and changes throughout the entire show, and then he's a good guy at some points, and then all of a sudden the next season goes on and he's horrible again and there's no character growth, and then the show kind of just feels stagnant. Overall, it just kind of feels lazy. Season 10's highest rated episode is Meanwhile. This is my favorite episode of Futurama for a variety of reasons, and that's because I'm a sucker for a good love story and I love the perfect ending. In the finale of season 10, which was supposed to be the end of the Futurama series, we follow Fry and Leela to the moon, the same place they went on their very first delivery. While adventuring on the moon amusement park, Leela is in an accident and almost dies. Fry, emotional, realizes he doesn't want to live his life without Leela and plans to propose to her. Back at the Planet Express, the professor has ginned up his new invention, the time button, where you can jump back 10 seconds at a time, but it requires 10 seconds to reset. Fry steals the time button to steal an egregious amount of diamonds for Leela's ring, which I want that many diamonds. That's pretty good. Fry continues to use the button when giving Leela the ring, but tells her to meet him at the top of the Vampire State Building if she wants to say yes. Fry's idiocy and loving heart really shows through here as he decides to leap from the top of the building after Leela is late for their meeting. As he jumps, he realizes Leela's not late. His watch was just ahead because he kept using the time button. He sees Leela as he falls and he decides he'll just press the button again in order to go to the top of the building. Problem is, he's been falling for more than 10 seconds.
Wait a second. There's no possible way out of this situation.
Fry continuously falls and presses the button over and over again until at one point he loses grip of the button and hits the ground, only for Leela to have to press it for him. Fry continues to fall until the team finds a way to save him, but in the process, they kill the professor and break the button, leaving only them in a world fully frozen, as well as a glimmer that continuously bothers them as they go on their adventures. This episode then brings us to an emotional closure on our main characters, Leela and Fry. As they live out their life together, marriage and old age exploration wrap up the series in a deeply satisfying way. The glimmer that was once bothering them actually is the professor. Once the professor finds them, he reverts time to before he ever created the button, and they get to live out their lives all over again.
What do you say? Want to go around again?
I do.
There's a reason this episode is tied for second best rated of all time for Futurama. I think personally it should be the highest rated, as it really encapsulates the entire show as a whole, shows some sci-fi absurdity with the entire world being frozen, but also really encapsulates the beauty of the love story between Fry and Leela that has been building for 13 years at this point. The end of this episode shows the wrap up of a beautiful love story, and also that they'll still adventure without you and live on, so you don't feel so sad the characters are gone forever, but you know that it's been played out and the show is over, right? And it should be the end of the show, because any more may be more based on characterization of the characters and just them staying within their own niche of comedy and be overplayed. And at what point is it beating a dead horse? So it should be over, right? Wrong. After this season, Futurama was again canceled and not going to be renewed, but it was renewed and resurrected by Hulu. That's where we begin season 11. The first season on Hulu, hated by many, is the second lowest rated season of all of Futurama, and it only loses to the 12th season of Futurama, which is also on Hulu. This episode covers the conversation of someone living in a simulation, which is a hot topic today, and handled well within this episode. The professor created a simulated universe, while Amy, the professor's assistant, points out the likelihood that they're all in a simulation as well, to which the professor first believes is preposterous, then agrees.
New evidence was presented and I changed my mind. I'm a scientist, not a politician.
But the simulation is taking up way too much power, so in order to find a solution, they drill all the way down into the sewage system and get free power, allowing the simulation to also create a simulation. This simulation within a simulation is definitely a classic trope, but done well and is fresh, using a new tactic to find an out of this simulation by overheating the system. So the simulated group decides to blow up a star, which they believe will do the trick. But before they get a chance to learn if they're in a simulation, the original crew slows them down. So as seconds pass in the simulated universe, years will be passing within the original universe. Within this episode, there's also a subplot of Bender realizing that he's also not technically a real person, as he doesn't get to think freely and he's mostly programmed. But there's not much else going on within this episode, and it's mostly just that main plot point. I think there could have been a lot more built within this episode and more subplots added to it, to be honest. But I will say the pacing does work better than some of the other episodes where they're rushing to get to everything. There's lots of fun quips within this episode, but it also does feel like filler compared to some other things, as no real plot points happen that are important to the overall world building experience. And we, of course, run into the same problems again with characterization comedy, where Bender is irrational, he acts irrational, and also that limited character growth. The characters never really feel fully endangered as the original crew, and they also don't try to solve the problem if they're in a simulation. So it's just interesting that not all, like, it's supposed to be an exact duplicate of the real world, but not the same things are happening or occurring. This episode ends on a philosophical, but overall, fun episode. I just would have liked more from it. It's not as bad as what people like to say about it. Season 12, the lowest rated season of all. We open up this episode with Bender, Leela, and Fry all just fucking up the ship. But no worries, they're fine. The sentient can opener that attacked Bender saved them all. The Planet Express ship is now a goner and taken to the graveyard of spaceships, where the episode starts to feel like a finale of the entire series again. They also do a fun little thing here where they acknowledge the really shitty episodes. My opinion, the worst season is season 6, and they kind of reference it here.
She saw us through lots of great adventures.
And a few mediocre ones. Honestly, some of those 3-part adventures were kind of sloppy.
As they say goodbye to the ship, Fry gets a crazy deja vu vision of all the different realities Fry has lived, including the reality in season 10 that we saw that technically they never lived, where Fry proposed to Leela and all that. Fry having a deja vu attack doesn't actually get off the ship, and so the entire crew goes back to save him, but unfortunately they all fall into the plasma that's below the ship graveyard. After being saved from the plasma, Fry once again goes to the Vampire State Building to ask Leela to marry him, as they both truly never experienced that moment. As remember, the professor turned back time to before he created the button in season 10. Fry says he remembers this all happening before, and he remembers their entire life from before, and he hits his head as he freaks out. Zoidberg diagnoses him with deja vu while the professor builds a new ship. While adventuring, Fry sees the ship when no one else can, and Fry is sure something went down in the ship that's important. They need to go back to the ship, but are attacked by an invisible ship. Fry and Leela get married in yet another timeline, giving fans a third emotional beat to their love story. If there weren't any satisfied with the first 2 times, but it doesn't hit as hard once you've seen this several times already, and you're almost hoping they stop here. Turns out they saved Fry, and the original crew was the ghost ship. While Fry did have the visions, the episode ends with Fry still having those visions, but wanting to understand and live out those experiences with Leela. Overall, it's a great episode if it wasn't already done 2 other times. This episode feels repetitive. We're in the graveyard again. We are getting the love story between Fry and Leela again. Like, episodes and clips are being replayed from previous episodes in order to fill out this entire episode. This episode kind of shows some self-awareness, though, with the invisible ship also being Fry and Leela still, because it's like they're resurrecting themselves over and over again and just essentially killing their previous selves. It's really interesting to watch, but I don't think that it hits as hard watching this love story essentially go through the motions once again. Futurama had a really great run for its 12 seasons, and I'm so glad it's over now. Actually, I'm hearing that it's not over yet. Futurama will be having 2 more seasons on Hulu coming out in 2025 and 2026, and I'm hoping it stops. I'm hoping they don't even happen, to be honest. This show is over, and at what point is it beating a dead horse? The way people talked about this show made it seem like it started off at the highest highs and fell to the lowest lows, but honestly, there's highs and lows throughout the entire show, and what it actually looks like according to ratings is like this. This show aged relatively well compared to a lot of other episodes made in 1999 and the early 2000s, which makes it really enjoyable to rewatch as someone that wasn't necessarily there when these current events were happening. I believe that the reason this show kind of aged well too is because they fall into the absurdity category rather than making fun of people they shouldn't be. Overall, I love Futurama, and I'll continue watching it whenever I'm bored or need a good pick-me-up, but we need to put to bed this show. The writing isn't as fresh as it used to be, and the characters are essentially just going through the motions again, and it's the same thing, just in a different setting. I want to see this show live and die while it's still in its prime, and it's already heading out of that direction. The best shows always end when they're supposed to, not because the executives want you to keep pushing out more content. I just don't want it to turn into a money grab, and honestly, it already kind of feels that way. It's been resurrected 2 other times now, and Hulu just needs to be the one to put it to bed. Well, I hope you learned something today, and I also hope you turn on an episode of Futurama. Bye. Very good, very good.